Despite her swift movements, Hansen manages to anticipate Xuan's next strike. With a sharp reaction, he sidesteps her attack and seizes her leg, effectively cutting off her momentum. In one fluid motion, he executes a powerful throw, slamming her to the ground. Without hesitation, he transitions into a painful leg hold, bending her limb to restrict her movement. Speaking in a mocking tone, Hansen addresses Xuan as mistress and asks if this performance qualifies as his victory. Enraged, Xuan lashes out verbally, hurling insults at him and stubbornly refusing to acknowledge defeat. She declares that he shouldn't even dream of beating her in a spar. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. A powerful energy field erupts around Xuan, morphing into blazing flames. Hansen is visibly shaken and instinctively retreats. Without warning, Xuan summons the soul of a monstrous beast, a towering predator radiating raw power and fear. Faced with the terrifying spirit, Hansen panics. He shouts at her, reminding her that they had agreed not to use animal souls in sparring. He barely dodges the beast's devastating strike as it crashes into the arena wall, sending concrete debris flying and plunging the area into chaos. As the dust settles, Xuan's body begins to take on a demonic form. Her energy flares with fierce intensity, and her relentless pressure becomes overwhelming. Hansen watches in stunned silence as she exits the arena, leaving him to grapple with his own limitations. He clutches his head in despair, realizing just how vast the gap is between his strength and hers. Strength he once took pride in now feels utterly insignificant. Yet, Xuan acknowledges that Hansen has grown. She admits, albeit grudgingly, that he's improved enough to not only resist her strikes but to provoke her into unleashing her beast soul, something she hadn't anticipated. In the days that follow, both continue training intensively in the sparring arena. Xuan, still fuming, accuses Hansen of playing the fool and resolves to teach him a lesson for his supposed deception. Hansen, sensing that she's deliberately trying to provoke him, chooses to remain calm. He views this ongoing challenge as an opportunity to sharpen his skills and considers himself lucky to have such a formidable woman as a sparring partner. However, he's still troubled by her harsh demeanor and complete lack of tenderness. Then, an unexpected voice calls his name. Turning, Hansen sees a girl confidently announcing that she's completed her initiation and can now leave the shelter. He instantly recognizes her as a former classmate from elementary school. Smiling, he reminisces on how quickly time has passed and begins to strike up a conversation. But their reunion is abruptly interrupted by a jet car landing beside them. A stern man steps out, clearly irritated. He scolds the girl for not using the home teleport again, forcing him to come looking for her. He warns her about the dangers of such travel, mentioning that transfer stations are full of ragamuffins and insisting she be more cautious. The girl tries to defuse the situation, explaining she was simply catching up with an old friend. But the man, exuding arrogance, gives Hansen a scornful glance. Hansen politely introduces himself and extends his hand, only to be coldly rejected. The man declares Hansen unworthy of being the girl's friend and warns him to stay away, threatening consequences if he doesn't comply. Deeply insulted by the man's rudeness, Hansen asks if he even knows who he's speaking to. The man is taken aback by Hansen's boldness and, irritated, demands clarification. The confrontation escalates. The man threatens to put Hansen in his place and charges at him. But Hansen, thanks to his intense training, is more than ready. He's mastered close-quarters combat and learned to harness demonic possession, skills that now give him the edge. Effortlessly, he dodges the incoming blows, swiftly closes the distance, and grabs the man by the collar. With precision and strength, he hurls the man to the ground. The girl screams out in alarm, pleading with Hansen to stop. Hansen loosens his grip and reassures her that the man is tougher than glass and won't break. He clarifies that he didn't mean to harm him, this was merely his way of saying hello. With that, Hansen checks the time and announces he's heading home. He turns to the girl and says they can catch up over dinner another time. Left fuming and humiliated, the man seethes. He repeats Hansen's name under his breath and vows to take revenge. The defeat is not something he will forget, or forgive. As the girl watched Hansen walk away, a man's voice broke the silence behind her. He remarked that her friend was quite an interesting one. The girl, sensing trouble, quickly asked him not to do anything to Hansen. The man simply smiled, a sly, knowing grin creeping across his face. He suggested that she should invite her new acquaintance to dinner sometime. After all, in his words, Hansen had given him a generous gift, and it was only polite to repay it. Though she agreed to the idea, the girl couldn't shake the feeling that the man had something far more sinister in mind. Meanwhile, Hansen was back in his room, seated in front of his computer. He was deep in thought, reflecting on how he hadn't been able to hunt animals in the mountains lately. Determined to find an alternative, he scoured a forum for any promising opportunities. Soon, one offer caught his eye. Someone was willing to pay a high price for the souls, flesh, and blood of mutant beasts. But Hansen knew how rare such materials had become. It wouldn't be easy to fulfill that request. Then, another advertisement stood out. A private client was hiring escorts, offering generous compensation. The only condition was the ability to take down 10 primitive creatures alone. It was a challenge, but one Hansen believed he could meet. He decided to respond to the offer, but he'd need a reliable weapon first. His old bronze crescent spear had broken during the last battle, so he started browsing for a replacement. That's when he found it, a Black Knight Series dual alloy bow paired with Demon's Edge Series arrows. The combination boasted exceptional killing power. On the market, it would cost at least 7 million credits. Strangely, the listing had been up for a while, with no buyers. Hansen studied the specs. The bow had a maximum range of 800 meters and could pierce armor from 300 meters away. However, there was a catch. According to the association's regulations, the weapon could only be used by those with over 7 power points. Hansen wasn't sure if he qualified, but he hoped his training, especially the ice muscle and jade bone techniques, might be enough to meet the threshold. He only had 1 million credits left, but he placed an offer anyway. Hours passed with no response. Hansen began to suspect the listing was outdated or that the seller was unimpressed by his offer. But then, to his surprise, a notification came through. The seller had accepted. Overjoyed, Hansen knew he'd secured an incredible deal. The next day, a transport company employee arrived at his room with a delivery. Hansen signed the documents, and the moment the worker left, he tore open the box to inspect his new weapon. He pulled the bowstring back, feeling its power. A thought flashed in his mind: this weapon would allow him to avoid close combat when facing beings of divine blood. He remembered that he'd already stolen prey from the Son of God twice before. That thought filled him with satisfaction, and he vowed to do it again. When he arrived at the designated meeting spot, he was surprised by the crowd that had gathered. Then, a stranger pointed directly at him and shouted that he recognized Hansen. The man laughed and called him an ass maniac, making fun of the bow slung across Hansen's back, which, he joked, suited him perfectly. Among the crowd, Hansen spotted an old acquaintance who pretended not to know him. The men teased him, asking if he was seriously here to get hired as a bodyguard. The first man continued his mockery, recalling the embarrassing incident where Hansen accidentally stabbed a man named Jan in the buttocks. Despite the laughter, Hansen kept his composure. He told them that if they didn't think he was fit to protect them, he would simply leave. But the man who had been joking earlier suddenly turned serious. That's not the case at all, he declared. Then, in a commanding tone, he ordered Hansen to stay. He would be his personal bodyguard. Those nearby were surprised by the decision. They asked the young man if he was sure and whether it was a wise move. The young gentleman, however, was resolute. He handed Hansen an employment contract and told him to sign it. One of the guards, clearly displeased, voiced his disapproval. He muttered that Hansen was just lucky and warned him not to disappoint their employer. Soon after, the group began moving through a forested area near the shelter. As they advanced cautiously, someone pointed to a patch of dense bushes up ahead. He claimed he'd just spotted a primitive creature hiding within. Tension rose in the air. The mission was only beginning. The group turned their heads, eyes narrowing as a blur of motion darted through the nearby bushes. A shadowy animal figure rushed past, barely visible through the thicket. Without hesitation, young Master Yuan issued an order to his hunters, who immediately sprang into action, charging into the underbrush in pursuit of the creature. The senior hunter shouted after them, reminding the team to ensure the young master's safety above all else. From his elevated position on a small hill, Hansen calmly readied an arrow. Drawing it from his quiver, he took aim and released it with practiced precision. The arrow cut through the air, but struck a tree trunk, nowhere near the beast's last location. Hansen noted that his Spirit of Destiny arrows were just as powerful as expected, but he needed to adjust the bow's draw weight for better control. The senior hunter, ever critical, smirked. He mocked Hansen's shot, saying that if he couldn't hit a target from just 20 meters away, he had no business calling himself the bodyguard of young Master Yuan. Unbothered, Hansen responded coolly. He hadn't meant to hit the animal, he was merely testing the arrow's balance. But the elder hunter wasn't convinced. That didn't look like practice, he muttered. It looked like an embarrassment. Nearby, Hansen noticed a familiar face, an old acquaintance standing silently among the crowd. It was clear from the man's expression that he didn't want anyone to know they had history. Meanwhile, the hunters had successfully driven the beasts into a dead end, herding them toward the base of a steep cliff. From his vantage point, Hansen watched the hunt unfold. Young Master Yuan was clearly elated. His team had managed to trap 3 black-spotted primitive beasts. The hunters urged him to be cautious, but Yuan, eager to test himself, lunged forward and attacked the predators with a blade known as the pain blade. Hansen, observing from afar, acknowledged the truth. These young masters were well-trained and had strong techniques. Their only real flaw was inexperience. The rest of the hunters, seasoned and disciplined, swiftly handled the creatures within minutes. As the dust settled, one of the young hunters eagerly approached the fallen monsters, admiring the trophies. But in his excitement, he failed to notice that one of the beasts wasn't quite dead. The creature's eyes opened silently. It had been feigning death, watching, waiting for the perfect moment. And then it pounced. The predator leapt into the air, its jaws wide open as it lunged at the unsuspecting hunter. Panic rippled through the crowd. The surrounding men stared in horror, too far to help in time. Suddenly, a sharp twang echoed through the forest. A single arrow whistled through the air, slicing cleanly past the young hunter's head and burying itself in the primitive beast's skull. The monster collapsed mid-air, dead before it hit the ground. The hunter fell backward, wide-eyed and gasping in disbelief. He screamed, scrambling away from the beast's lifeless body. His fellow hunters rushed to his side, hacking furiously at the corpse to ensure it was truly dead. Then Yuan himself ran over, kneeling beside the shaken hunter. With genuine concern on his face, he checked him for injuries and asked if he was all right. Still trembling, the young man nodded. "I'm fine," he muttered. "But I was scared to death." The senior hunter's reaction was far less gracious. Furious, he turned on Hansen, shouting that the man had nearly killed one of their own with his reckless shot. The other hunters joined in, voicing their anger and suspicion. But before things could spiral, a sharp command rang out. "Stand down," young Master Yuan ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. The senior hunter, clearly displeased, glared at Hansen. He asked why the man was still here. Hadn't he been dismissed? Suddenly, Yuan strode forward. Without a word, he seized the senior hunter by the throat. His voice was cold and composed as he clarified. He had told the man to leave. Yuan's eyes blazed with fury. "I pay you to provide security," he snapped. "Where were you when one of my men was being attacked?" He didn't stop there. The young master continued dressing the man down, accusing him of inaction and cowardice, and now, trying to shift blame onto the only person who actually saved someone. The senior hunter stood his ground, reminding Yuan that firing him meant breaking their contract. He would be owed compensation. Without hesitation, Yuan pulled a thick wad of cash from his pocket and tossed it contemptuously into the air. "Take your money and leave," he spat. "You're useless." The older hunter stormed past Hansen, glaring daggers at him. His eyes were full of rage and humiliation. It was clear he bore Hansen a deep grudge. Meanwhile, the young hunter who had been saved approached Hansen, bowing his head in gratitude. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Hansen only smiled. "It was nothing," he replied modestly. "I'm just glad you're safe." Yuan's gaze lingered on the bow in Hansen's hand, Doomed Soul, a weapon that could only be used by those with a power level of at least 7. He raised an eyebrow. "Are you really level 7? He asked. Before Hansen could speak, the young hunter who'd just been rescued answered confidently, "He has to be. There's no way someone below level 7 could shoot like that." Young Master Yuan studied Hansen closely. The precision, the speed, no hesitation. He wasn't just strong, he was controlled. The young master mused aloud that Hansen's level had to be even higher than 7, perhaps 8 or more, just to be able to draw and fire that bow with such perfect form and deadly accuracy. Impressed, he stepped forward and extended a hand. "I hope we can work together for a long time," he said sincerely. Hansen shook his hand, feeling a sense of quiet pride. This wasn't just a job, it was recognition. A wealthy employer with insight and intelligence like Yuan was hard to come by. Hansen felt he had finally found someone worth following. 2 days later, Hansen returned to the shelter. At the gate, he was met by a group of hunters. One of them, a familiar face, mockingly asked if he had made a fortune yet. It was the senior hunter, the same one who had been humiliated and thrown out by young Master Yuan. His tone was sharp and laced with venom. Stepping closer, he growled that he didn't appreciate Hansen being there. And then, without warning, he lunged. Drawing a knife, the older man hurled himself at Hansen, shouting that he'd teach the boy a lesson. Hansen's old acquaintance, watching from the side, said nothing. He pretended not to know Hansen, too scared, or too cowardly, to intervene. The dagger whistled through the air, but Hansen was gone. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished from where he stood. Before anyone could process what had happened, Hansen reappeared beside the senior hunter. With a fluid motion, he grabbed the man's arm mid-strike, twisted it effortlessly, and disarmed him. The knife fell into Hansen's hand. The hunter hit the ground, stunned. The onlookers stood frozen. Their eyes were wide with disbelief. How had this quiet young man just taken down an experienced hunter so easily? Even Hansen's old friend looked on in shock, remembering a time when Hansen was weak and hopeless, barely able to kill a black beetle, scraping by just to survive. But this was someone entirely different. Still pinned to the ground, the senior hunter screamed at the others. "What are you waiting for? Help me," he bellowed, furious and humiliated. But Hansen wasn't done. "You talk too much," he muttered, twisting the man's arm harder until a scream ripped from his throat. The other hunters sprang into action, drawing their weapons and rushing toward Hansen in unison. In response, Hansen took the dagger, her gleaming blade now pulsing with energy, and made a series of calculated movements. Lines of radiant light crackled in the air around him. The hunters skidded to a stop. They stared, stunned. This wasn't normal. This wasn't something they had seen before. That glow, that pressure. It was something else. Hansen glanced down at the knife, eyebrows raised. "Who? Ruby steel," he murmured. That was a top-tier weapon. Blades like that could sell for over $1 million. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Yeah. I've been needing a short dagger like this." Behind him, his former friend watched in disbelief. This couldn't be the same Hansen. Not the weak boy who once barely survived. Not the failure who hunted insects. But Hansen wasn't interested in nostalgia. He turned back to the wounded man on the ground. "This knife's too good for someone like you," he said. "So I'll be keeping it." Tucking it into his belt, he turned his back and walked away, each step deliberate and calm, as if nothing in the world could stop him. But it wasn't over. The senior hunter roared from the ground. "Stop right there," he ordered. "This isn't finished yet." One of the other hunters echoed his anger. "You're too arrogant," he snapped. "You think too highly of yourself." Suddenly, another rider appeared, blocking Hansen's path. He was a powerful man on horseback, cloaked in dark leathers, and his mere presence made the air feel heavier. The older hunter pointed at Hansen, his voice full of bitterness. "That bastard injured me. And stole my weapon. Avenge me." The man on horseback, referred to only as the writer, sneered. "You idiot," he spat at the senior hunter. "You're a disgrace." Without warning, the writer drew a massive whip, its barbed coils glinting dangerously in the light. "You're mad," he said to Hansen, raising the weapon high. "And today, I'll introduce you to death." The whip snapped forward with terrifying force. But Hansen was ready. He moved like lightning, parrying the blow with practiced ease. Their duel exploded into motion, whip cracking through the air, Hansen dodging and countering every strike with astonishing precision. The young man was stunned by the strength of his opponent. So the rumors are true, he thought. This guy's physical level is at least 9.5. But he wasn't the only one surprised. The writer's expression twisted. When did this loser get so strong, he wondered aloud. He can't be allowed to live, he's too dangerous. With renewed fury, the man raised his whip again, ready to end it. But Hansen moved first. In a single smooth motion, he pulled a battle arrow from his quiver and drew his bow. The tension in the air thickened instantly. The arrow pointed straight at the man on horseback. For the first time, real fear flickered in the writer's eyes. He hadn't expected this. He thought Hansen would run, submit, not draw on him. Now, with the arrow aimed squarely at his chest, that confidence began to crack. Silence fell over the group. Everyone held their breath. The hunters nearby were stunned. None of them could believe what they were witnessing, a lone young man aiming a drawn bow at Tanyang, the strongest among them, the so-called son of God. Faces full of disbelief and confusion turned toward Hansen, who stood unmoving, the string pulled taut, the arrow ready to fly. Hansen could feel the strain in his muscles. Holding a bow at full draw wasn't easy, and it drained his strength by the second. But he couldn't show weakness. Not now. His eyes locked on Tanyang. Move again, he warned coldly, and I'll kill you. His voice wasn't raised, but its calmness was more terrifying than a shout. The confidence in it sent a chill through the air. Suddenly, a group of figures emerged from the side. At their center was Xuan, flanked by her men. She approached without hesitation and stood between the two combatants. Lower your arrow, she ordered Hansen, her voice firm and unwavering. Hansen blinked, surprised. What is she doing here? Her sudden appearance threw him off for a moment, but her presence only deepened the mystery surrounding her. Xuan didn't wait for a response. She turned to Tanyang. You too. Stand down. Hansen kept his eyes on Tanyang, unsure if the man would obey. His fingers stayed firm on the string. He wasn't letting go until he was sure it was safe. Tanyang scowled. He clearly didn't want to obey, but he also couldn't disobey Xuan directly. Reluctantly, he lowered his whip, but his anger didn't fade. This brat has no respect for anyone, Tanyang spat. Just days ago, he stabbed you in the buttock. Does that mean nothing? The words rang through the air like a slap. It was loud, insulting, and laced with venom. His rage surged again. He challenged me today, humiliated me. I won't let this go. But before he could act, Xuan raised her hand. A blazing energy flared to life in her palm, and in an instant, she launched a focused energy beam directly at Tanyang. It struck his whip arm with a thunderous impact, the force knocking him clean off his horse. Gasps erupted from every corner. Tanyang hit the ground hard, his weapon flying from his grasp. His men rushed to his side, panicked and scrambling, asking if he was all right. Xuan didn't even flinch. I can handle my people, she said sharply. I don't need others interfering. With grace and authority, she passed by Hansen, her voice low and commanding. Follow me. Now. Hansen hesitated only a second before obeying. He could tell, this was not a request. Behind them, Tanyang glared with seething hatred. His pride was shattered, and the image of Hansen walking away beside Xuan only fueled his jealousy. How did that bastard charm her? He thought bitterly. His men whispered behind his back, some snickering. Looks like it was love at first stab, one muttered. Their laughter was crude and inappropriate, but Tanyang couldn't contain his fury. His face darkened. This will not go unpunished. Later, Hansen learned that Xuan wanted him to join her sharpshooting team. But the idea didn't excite him. His mood didn't match her plans. Xuan, however, was undeterred. You can channel the spirit of fate, she told him. That means you're not just a good shot, you're a rare one. She stepped closer. You challenged someone powerful today. If I hadn't stepped in, you'd already be in trouble. I suggest you stop pretending you can do everything on your own. Hansen nodded slowly, appreciating her concern. Thanks, he said. But I can handle myself. Xuan didn't flinch. Maybe, but I'm the only one here with an elite marksman squad. And if you want to survive long enough to make it into military school, you'll need allies. Starting with me. Hansen frowned. Who said I want to go to military school? I don't even have the physical fitness to hit level 10. Xuan's eyes narrowed with conviction. That standard is high or for ordinary people. But you're not one of them. Hansen stared at her, suspicion creeping into his voice. What are you trying to say? She didn't hesitate. You might look like a newbie, but I've seen enough to know what you really are. And I need what you bring to my team. Hansen studied her face, trying to gauge her intent. Then, with a smirk, he asked, So, you're still mad about that whole stabbed you in the butt thing? The reaction was instant. Xuan's face turned crimson and she exploded with fury. Don't you dare bring that up again, she screamed. Her shout echoed down the hall, and everyone nearby turned to look. Hansen just raised an eyebrow, more amused than apologetic. In her eyes, without military education or a noble title, Hansen had no future in the army, no chance at advancement. He'd be cannon fodder at best, just another nameless private. Her assessment was harsh, but grounded in realism. But Hansen wasn't the kind to accept such a fate. He looked her straight in the eye. Why are you so sure I won't earn a noble title? There was steel in his voice. He declared his plan. He would continue mastering the icebone technique, harness the power of higher-level genetic crystals, and climb the ranks himself. His words weren't boastful, they were a challenge to fate. Xuan didn't like being challenged. With a scowl, she grabbed him by the lapels and shook him hard. Don't question me, she barked. Join my squad. Now. Hansen realized that it was not worth pushing her further. Her intensity was dangerous. Calm but firm, he nodded. All right. I'll join. His tone was steady, his decision final. That night, Hansen lay in bed, exhausted. The last few days had been a whirlwind of tension, fights, and revelations. He thought about Xuan, her determination, her strength. If she ever decided to kill him, he wasn't sure he'd be able to stop her. The thought chilled him. She's not just a fighter. She's a storm. His train of thought was broken by a gentle knock on the door. When he opened it, his mother stood there. "Can you take your sister to school tomorrow?" she asked softly. "I've got errands to run." Hansen's face lit up with surprise and joy. "You enrolled her?" His mother smiled and explained that the money he had left earlier had been enough. Not only had she used it, she had managed to get his little sister into one of the best schools in the city, known for its cutting-edge education and elite status. Hansen felt a surge of relief. Finally, something good. The next day, he walked hand in hand with his little sister toward the school gates. On the way, he asked her, "So, how do you like it? Made any friends yet?" She hesitated. "Not really. I'm still a bit shy. I haven't talked to anyone much." Hansen smiled and gently ruffled her hair. "That's okay. Just be kind, be yourself. Take your time. And if anyone bullies you, you come to me first. Got it?" The girl nodded, a small smile forming. His calm, protective presence gave her the courage she needed. But just as they reached the school, Hansen froze. He spotted a familiar figure in the crowd, his first uncle, standing with his own child. Their eyes locked. The uncle's expression soured instantly, his surprise quickly turning to suspicion. He walked over, his voice restrained but cold. "What are you doing here?" Hansen remained composed. "Just bringing my sister to school." The uncle sneered. "This school costs millions. Where did your family get that kind of money?" Then came the accusation, "You still haven't given me my share of the house. According to the contract, everything should be split equally. So, where's my part?" Hansen's gaze turned sharp. "Did you even read the contract?" He reminded the man that his late father had paid off 2 million of the family's debt out of his own pocket. That debt, Hansen argued, cancelled any claim the uncle had. "No one in your branch gets a single coin more," Hansen said icily. The man's voice rose. "You little brat. You think you can cheat me? I'll go talk to your mother right now and set things straight." Hansen didn't flinch. "If you trespass onto our property, I'll have the right to shoot you." His voice was low, calm, and utterly cold. The uncle snapped. "You arrogant little mutt," he shouted, and lunged. But Hansen was faster. He stepped in, caught the man's fist effortlessly, and with a swift, fluid motion, lowered his stance and executed a perfect throw. The uncle hit the ground hard, stunned and humiliated. Standing over him, Hansen looked down with eyes like steel. "If you want to die, feel free to come to my house again." The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of finality. Nearby, his little sister had watched everything. Her eyes were wide with fear, but behind it, there was something else. Admiration. Her brother had protected her, stood strong, and shown no fear. She clutched his hand a little tighter. The chaos wasn't over yet. The uncle's wife, trying to comfort their crying child, gently hushed him and said, "Don't be afraid. I'll take you to school now, and then I'm calling the police to have that hooligan arrested." Hansen didn't flinch. Calmly, he turned to his uncle. "You should relax," he said coldly. "Let's make decisions carefully." Then, with a practiced motion, he pulled out a tiny voice recorder. The uncle's eyes widened in horror. It didn't take long for him to realize everything had been recorded. His threats, his shouting, even his attempt to attack, captured in crisp audio. And it could all be used against him. Panic took hold. "You disgusting little rat," the man growled, lunging toward the recorder. "Delete it. Now." But Hansen didn't step back. He simply grabbed his uncle's arm and twisted, locking it in a painful hold. The man winced, gasping in pain. "We're still family," Hansen said with a chilling calm. "So let's be civil. You transfer me 2 million, and I'll consider deleting the file." The man growled, his voice shaking with fury. "You're insane. This is blackmail." Hansen didn't even blink. He twisted harder, the pressure making the man's face go red. "Do it." A few moments later, Hansen's phone buzzed. "Transfer confirmed," 2,000,000 credits. Hansen smiled, cool and satisfied. See? That wasn't so hard. He leaned in closer. Of course, I'll delete the recording if I feel like it. And don't come near my house again unless you want trouble. He released the man's arm and turned away. His uncle sat on the ground, clutching his arm and muttering curses under his breath. The humiliation was eating him alive. Once Hansen and his sister were out of earshot, the man exploded. Vile bastard, he screamed. When did that weak little brat become so twisted? The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Hansen, meanwhile, was quiet. The encounter had left a heavy weight on him, not because of the fight, but because his little sister had seen it all. She walked beside him in silence, her voice barely audible. Hansen's chest tightened. She's scared. He blamed himself. The violence, the yelling, none of that belonged in her world. Not at her age. And certainly not from him. He made a silent vow he would never use violence in front of her again. Not unless there was no other choice. She deserved peace. Not a front-row seat to family hatred. Later that day, Hansen arrived at the Star River Physical Training Center. He'd been working hard on his icebone technique, and now he wanted to see the results for himself. He signed up for the test, quietly determined. Overhead, loudspeakers blared with names and scores. Not a single participant had managed to reach the required combat rating in under 20 seconds. Then, Hansen's name was called. Not bad, he thought. But next time, I'll do better. I need to hit level 2. His ambition was clear. He wanted to become the captain of a starship, and that required excellence in both skill and strength. Hansen had deliberately waited until the test room was nearly empty. But just as he was about to enter, he realized someone else had beaten him to the capsule. The doors were sealed. Curious, he walked over to the observation screen to see who it was. What he saw made his eyes narrow in surprise. Inside the training capsule, a participant was unleashing devastating attacks using a bee-soul, a rare technique where ones will bonded with the power of a creature. The robots inside the simulation were being shattered one after another. Robots charged. He tore through their cores with a single blow. With each step forward, his strikes grew fiercer, power and fury combining in perfect rhythm. The training capsule echoed with the metallic wail of broken machines. Hansen surged forward. He wasn't just participating, he was dominating. He wasn't done yet. Back at the physical training center, a stunned young man stared at the results on the screen. 10 seconds. That's impossible. He blinked again, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. In disbelief, he whispered, he cleared the test, in just 10 seconds. Outside the center, word spread fast. Crowds had gathered at the entrance, buzzing with excitement. Did you hear? Someone said. A newbie destroyed all the robots in only 10 seconds. No way, that armor, wasn't that the money guy's beast gear? Another chimed in. Inside, many recognized the armor. It wasn't just any suit, it belonged to someone with deep resources. Whispers followed, all wondering the same thing, who was this masked newcomer? Far from the commotion, in a luxurious villa by the sea, a conversation was already underway. Hey, come take a look at this, a voice called out. A young man entered the room, having just finished dressing for class. What's the matter? His friend pointed at a glowing holographic screen. A new record just dropped. Some random guy completed the physical test in 10 seconds flat. No face on the camera, he added, but judging from his performance, he's got mastery of ultranuclear gene techniques and can use beast souls too. The young man frowned. That means he might max out every gene, except maybe the divine one. All right, the friend sighed. Enough with the breakdown. Just tell me, who is he? His tone turned anxious. If this guy's for real, he could stop me from making it to the second refuge of the gods. I need a spot among the 10 sons of God. The other man nodded. He's definitely not ordinary. My guess? Military background. Could be, his friend replied. But we need to find out everything we can, fast. His expression grew serious. A guy like that could shake the entire shelter. And I need to know who I'm up against. Meanwhile, Hansen was back at the transfer station, summoned only days after his short departure. Swen was already waiting. You're mine now, she told him bluntly. I need to know where you are at all times. Hansen raised his hands. I wasn't trying to hide. I just went back to the Star River. She didn't care for explanations. No excuses. Report to the training center. You're officially joining the shooting team, starting today. She turned to leave but stopped and glanced back sharply. And remember, you're only part of this group because I brought you in. Hansen watched her go. Her words echoed in his mind. The Son of God is tied to the Star Group. Rumors swirled around that name. And Hansen had more than curiosity, his father's death was somehow connected to them. Despite her sharp tone, he bowed his head respectfully. Thank you for trusting me. You surprisingly kind. As he followed an escort officer down the corridor, Hansen couldn't help but wonder. Why did she choose to protect me? Does she like me? They arrived at a door. The officer pushed it open. You're expected inside. Hansen entered the room. There stood a striking woman, powerful and elegant. She eyed him carefully. I'm Hansen. Schwen told me to report here. She stared at him in silence, then asked, Name? Hansen. Her eyes narrowed. You're 10 seconds late. He fumbled for words. I didn't mean to be late. Schwen gave me instructions and she cut him off coldly. No more excuses. If you're going to be in my unit, you'll learn discipline. She handed him a form. Fill this out. Now. As Hansen sat and scribbled answers, the woman leaned in close. Her imposing figure and confident air distracted him a lot. It was hard to focus. What's with this hostility? He thought. He finally handed her the form. You're expected in the training room tomorrow. 6 sharp. No delays. Just then, a soft beep echoed through the room. A holographic projection formed in the air. It was Schwen. Both of you, report to my office. Immediately. They arrived at Schwen's office. On the large screen behind her, a video played in silence. It was the training test. Hansen's test. Robots exploding. Beast armor glinting. 10 seconds. The internet had exploded with reactions. Hansen's jaw tightened. How did this even get online? He stood there, watching himself tear through combat bots on screen, his secret now broadcast to the world. And he knew there was no going back. Back in the training center, a group of girls crowded around a screen, their eyes wide with awe. That has to be the Money Brother, right? One of them whispered. Did you see the way he moved? That's ultra-nuclear technique for sure, another replied, still stunned by the speed and precision shown in the video. They couldn't believe what they had witnessed. But did anyone see his face? One of them asked. No one had. The footage was impressive, but the identity of the mysterious fighter remained hidden. Meanwhile, Hansen sat in silence, trying to calm his nerves. At first, fear gripped him, the video's out. But then, relief washed over him. They don't know it's me. Zwan, one of the women discussing the video, narrowed her eyes. This proves it. Not only does the Money Brother possess divine-grade armor, but he's also mastered ultra-nuclear techniques, she said, more to herself than anyone else. She was determined to find him. If he was at the fitness testing center, then he must have been close by. We'll find him. She speculated that he must be from a distant district, someone extraordinary like that couldn't have come from the Star River area, where talents were rare. We have to recruit him, she said firmly. If we do, we won't need the Son of God to help us hunt divine-level creatures. Hansen quietly observed. He could see it clearly now, Zwan wasn't just chasing talent. She was aiming to change the social order of the shelter. He chuckled lightly, trying to sound casual. I heard the Money Brother is a lone wolf. It won't be easy to rope him into any group. Zwan gave him a playful but intense look, resting her hand on his shoulder. Oh, don't worry, she said, eyes gleaming. We have ways of persuading men. Hansen swallowed hard. He couldn't deny it. Zwan, like Yang, was dangerously beautiful, confident, and utterly persuasive. He looked between them both. They've gone insane, he thought. Later, Hansen returned to his quarters. He glanced toward a large reinforced cage in the corner of the room. Inside was a beast, restrained but powerful, and evolving. Its aura was growing more intense each day. Just a few more days, Hansen thought. Then it will reach the divine level. The next morning, Hansen arrived at the rifle group's training camp. Rows of shooters trained relentlessly at automated stations, firing shot after shot. Among the crowd, Hansen suddenly spotted a familiar face. Xiao? The shooter paused, turned, and froze in confusion. Wait. How do you know my name? Hansen blinked. His cover was slipping. Everyone knows you, he bluffed smoothly. You're associated with the legendary Money Brother. Xiao beamed with pride. Ah. Yeah, I guess word's getting around. But trust me, training here isn't easy. He leaned closer, voice dropping. You better watch out. The leader of the shooting group is a sadist. And a pervert. Hansen sighed. I've already had the pleasure of meeting her. Before they could say more, a loud voice cut through the air like a whip. What are you two doing just standing around? Yang Man approached, her eyes glowing an intense red, filled with irritation. Both young men froze. Her presence was overwhelming. Her voice was cold steel. You're distracting each other from training. That means punishment. Her sentence was harsh. Xiao, 1,000 target hits. With a level 7 bow. Don't stop until it's done. Both boys looked horrified. Yang's eyes narrowed. Break the rules, and you'll regret it more than you can imagine. Xiao whispered in despair. There's no way I can do that. I just reached level 7. Even drawing that bow will drain me. Hansen put a hand on his friend's shoulder. No time to complain. Let's get started. Xiao sighed heavily. The elder will probably assign someone to watch us. There's no escape. Hansen nodded. Exactly. We have to train anyway. Might as well push through. He looked his friend in the eye. This is the kind of thing men are supposed to endure. He knew how tough it would be. Xiao's strength had only just broken into level 7. It wasn't just the number of hits, it was whether he could even last that long. As they trained, they overheard a group of older disciples talking nearby. Tomorrow morning, we're heading out to hunt a creature with divine blood. Yeah, another said. The Son of God himself invited the best marksman to join the mission. The words echoed in Hansen's ears. The Son of God, again. That name kept coming up. And with it, the shadow of the mysterious organization connected to his father's death loomed ever larger. Hansen kept his expression calm, but inside, he absorbed every detail about the upcoming hunt. Just then, an instructor strode over, his voice sharp and commanding. Enough chatting. Get back to training, now. Without hesitation, Shiro reached into his pocket and handed the instructor a wad of money. Please, put in a good word for me. I want to join the hunt. To Shiro's surprise, the instructor brusquely shoved the money away. Don't think I'd take a bribe from a bad shooter like you, he sneered. Turning to Hansen, the instructor's tone grew harsher. And you, don't slack off. Train harder. Before walking off, he glared at them both. This unit isn't a place for scum. Remember, 1,000 hits on the target, or you'll regret it. Hansen watched him leave and thought, no point slacking here. The rules are brutal. Shiro muttered, what's wrong with that guy today? He never refused bribes before. Hansen shrugged, but Shiro's words hung in the air. The instructor doesn't like you. Watch yourself. If he's angry, it could get dangerous. Shiro warned him not to be too honest with the instructor, explaining that the man was obsessed with Yang and might be acting out because of her. Hansen felt his mind swirl with too much new information. Deciding to clear his head, he focused back on training. The arrows won't shoot themselves. He told Shiro, we'll definitely go hunting tomorrow. Then, with surprising ease, Hansen drew his bow and sent an arrow flying from 150 meters straight to the target. Even Shiro was stunned. That kind of accuracy was rare, especially for a beginner. Hansen knew the secret. The basics of archery were easy to pick up, but persistence made the difference. One after another, Hansen hit the bullseye 40 times in a row. Yang, watching nearby, couldn't hide her surprise. He's got real talent, she muttered. Older students passing by nodded approvingly. He shoots fast and steady, way beyond a beginner's skill. They noticed Hansen never changed his stance and always shot from the same spot. Clearly, he'd been practicing in secret. But the instructor watched silently from the sidelines, his expression unreadable. Unlike the others, he wasn't impressed. People like him don't last long at the top, he thought coldly. Hansen urged Shiro, don't stand there. Keep training. Hard work is the only way to get results. Shiro pulled back his bowstring, thoughts racing. If this guy can lead tomorrow's hunt, he'll be my hero. Hansen smiled mysteriously. Trust me. We'll succeed, I have a plan. Yang Man observed closely, nodding to herself. Shron had made a good call. Hansen was capable, and on pace to finish the task before midnight. But Yang wondered if Hansen could work well with others without conflict, a vital trait for team hunts. Exhausted, Shiro finally collapsed to the floor. Together, they had shot over 5,000 arrows, a brutal challenge that tested every ounce of their stamina. Most of those hits belonged to Hansen, who had become the driving force behind their success. Shura looked at him with sincere gratitude. Without you, I'd never have made it. You're my idol now. Despite the triumph, Hansen's mind churned with worry about the hunt ahead. What kind of divine blood creatures will the Divine Sun squad be after? He asked. Shura shrugged. No problem. I've already learned everything there is to know today. In this world, if you've got money, there's no secret you can't buy. He lowered his voice. Our target tomorrow? A flying creature with divine blood. That sent a chill through Hansen. Flying beasts were notoriously fast and agile, hard to catch, even for the best marksman. Shurao smiled wryly. There aren't many in the steel armor hideout who can shoot a bow well. Hansen's resolve hardened. Tomorrow will be the real test. The Son of God had no choice but to ask for help from Hansen and the others to improve his chances of success in the hunt. Hansen pondered how he could possibly defeat the flying creature, knowing that divine blood flying monsters were incredibly powerful, and that ordinary arrows wouldn't even scratch them. Back in his room, Hansen set out to find a special kind of arrow, one containing Z steel. Z steel was no ordinary metal. It was a new alloy far stronger and more elastic than regular steel. Even adding a tiny fraction of Z steel to a weapon's material would dramatically boost its performance. The problem was the official market prices were astronomical, and Hansen couldn't afford them. So, he had to search for alternative sources. He knew the Black Knight's weapons contained only about 0.5% Z steel, and bowstrings had barely reached 1%. Luckily, Hansen discovered a seller offering arrows with more than 1% Z steel, and at a reasonable price, perfect for him. The seller arranged to meet Hansen in a strange location, an abandoned alley in the red light district. The setting immediately made Hansen suspicious. During negotiations, the atmosphere was tense and mysterious. Hansen even offered to handle the transaction remotely and have the arrows mailed to him, but the seller insisted on a personal meeting. At the meeting spot, Hansen saw a stranger waving at him, whom he assumed was the seller. The man led him into a deserted alley and straightforwardly asked if Hansen really intended to buy the rare arrow he was offering. The seller proudly presented the arrow, explaining it was handmade and invited Hansen to inspect the quality before paying. Hansen picked it up and immediately noticed the arrow's perfect center of gravity, a sign of a true craftsman's skill. To test the arrow's strength, Hansen pulled out a knife from the cutting steel series and asked permission to strike the arrow with it. The seller, confident in his work, said Hansen could test the arrow as much as he wanted. Hansen struck the arrow several times with the knife. While the knife's blade quickly got nicks and scratches, the arrow's surface remained flawless. This proved the arrow contained at least 1% Z steel. Satisfied, Hansen told the seller the arrow was excellent and that he was ready to buy. The seller explained that his arrows were crafted from bearings taken from a Star-class battleship, assuring Hansen he wasn't trying to cheat him. He stressed that the Z steel content exceeded 1% and that his craftsmanship far surpassed anything machines could produce. At first, Hansen was skeptical about the offer, but after testing the arrow's strength, he relaxed and began to trust the seller. The man pocketed the money and said he was glad to cooperate, adding that Hansen could contact him anytime if needed. The next morning, a large group of hunters gathered near the gates of the refuge of the gods, preparing for a crucial mission. Tien reported to the Son of God that among those assembled was a familiar troublemaker, the same guy who regularly stirred up problems around them. Xuan, accompanied by his team, approaches the main entrance of the vault, drawing the attention of all the hunters gathered. The Son of God greets Xuan confidently, declaring that they will defeat the divine creature with a single blow. Xuan promises that her shooting group will perform at their best. Suddenly, Tianang interrupts Hansen with a rude question, asking why the rifle team accept someone like him and calling him a freak. Xuan quickly steps in, reminding Tianang that she had already told Hansen he was part of her group, and that Tianang should remember that. The Son of God notices the tension rising and tells Tianang to stop embarrassing Hansen. Reluctantly, Tianang backs down but mutters a quiet, contemptuous remark, calling Hansen trash hiding behind a woman. Xiao watches warily, concerned that Tianang might cause trouble. Hansen, unfazed, says it doesn't bother him since Tianang is all bark and no bite. Meanwhile, the lookout hunters report that they have reached the destination and are ready. Xuan and her team take their positions at the mountain's base, prepared to track and flush out the creature according to the Son of God's plan. Qinwan proudly presents a special gift to Xuan's shooting team, tight cases filled with arrows. The Son of God orders 100 arrows, each containing 1% Z steel, to be distributed to every shooter. Then, pointing at Hansen with obvious hostility, he declares that Hansen will receive none. Hansen stays calm, knowing his secret identity as the money brother gives him an unseen advantage. Yang Man questions the Son of God's decision, reminding him Hansen is part of the shooting team. Qinhuan arrogantly replies that he gives the arrows for free and can choose who gets them. Yang Man reluctantly accepts since the Son of God is in charge. She orders her subordinate to pick the 5 best test participants and give each 20 arrows, confident that their arrows are just as good as the star arrows. Yang Man suspects the Son of God holds a grudge against Hansen and is deliberately ignoring him. She feels furious, almost wanting to beat him. Senior warriors give instructions to all hunters, prioritizing elite fighters for key ambush spots. Tianang contemptuously points to Hansen and Xiao, telling them they are not elite and must position themselves near a boulder far from the main spots. Hansen tells Xiao to ignore the insult and follow orders to avoid trouble. Xiao is furious, feeling deliberately humiliated and convinced the Son of God is sabotaging them by withholding the star arrows from Hansen. Hansen isn't surprised. He believes he's long been a thorn in the Son of God's side, and this is just more proof. When Xiao asks why he isn't angry, Hansen admits he is but chooses to stay calm and collected. He knows that to gain respect from the senior players, he must speak their language, force. He's determined to kill the divine creature and claim its soul. Xiao doubts this is possible. He points out that the Son of God's people on the opposite cliff will shoot the creature first. Examining his arrows carefully, Xiao sadly concludes that regular weapons won't harm such a powerful monster. Suddenly, a loud and terrifying scream echoed through the mountains, instantly sharpening the focus of the young hunters. The hunt for the powerful creature had begun. The Divine Sun's team had successfully lured out the beast, a massive purple dragon known as a perp. Yang Man took command, instructing her archers to hold their fire until she gave the signal, ensuring maximum impact. The archers readied their bows, drew their arrows, and held their breath in tense anticipation. When Yang Man finally ordered the volley, dozens of arrows shot through the air toward the purple dragon. But the creature's thick, powerful scales deflected most of the arrows effortlessly. A few struck, but caused no serious damage. Xiao quickly realized the star arrows were surprisingly ineffective, questioning their supposed quality. Hansen reached into his quiver and pulled out one of his star arrows, knowing that a shot had to be perfect, hitting the dragon's eye or it would be wasted. Carefully, he drew back his bowstring and aimed. Arrows made with over 1% Z steel should be able to pierce the dragon's defenses. Xiao noticed the Divine Sun's men were only making a feint attack to bait the dragon out and distract it for a decisive strike. Then, the Son of God leapt into the air, drew a star arrow, and prepared to fire the final blow he believed would end the battle. Shinsuan was confident this arrow would bring him glory. He let loose the shot, and the arrow hit the dragon, causing severe damage that left the beast unable to fight back. In pain, the purple dragon opened its massive jaws and released a roar so fierce it sent chills through even the most hardened warriors. Hansen, however, held back. He felt the time wasn't right yet, the dragon's defenses were still too strong, and he needed to wait for a better moment. The hunters continued firing volley after volley, gradually wearing down the beast's strength. Then Yang Man summoned the dragon soul into the form of a glowing, energy-charged arrow and bow. Refusing to let the Divine Sun claim victory, she aimed carefully and released the energy arrow. It struck with devastating force, igniting powerful fiery explosions across the dragon's body. The beast screamed in agony, its massive form engulfed in flames, but it still survived, its remarkable regenerative ability kicking in. At this moment, the Son of God rode a trained monster, chasing after the purple dragon and ordering hunters to shoot its wings to prevent it from escaping. The dragon, seeing the hunters as a mortal threat, tried to flee to a nearby mountain ledge to hide and recover. Hansen sprinted after the purple dragon along the treacherous mountain trails, frustrated by his lack of gear and mount like the others. He knew they needed to capture the monster first. Xiao doubted their chances, fearing injuries amid the difficult terrain. Suddenly, they spotted Xuan deftly chasing the dragon, leaping from ledge to ledge on her mount with astonishing agility and confidence. Flying overhead, Xuan extended her hand toward Hansen, signaling for him to join her. Without hesitation, Hansen leapt up and grabbed her hand mid-air. Moments later, he was behind her on the tamed monster, and they raced after the purple dragon together. Xiao, left behind, reached out with a pitiful look, silently begging to be taken along. Hansen, now seated close behind Xuan, couldn't help but notice her slim waist. Xuan immediately noticed his distracted gaze and sharply ordered him to focus, warning him not to let his hands wander. She explained she only brought him along because her assistant vouched for his excellent marksmanship. He could be valuable in battle. As the chase continued, Hansen thought about how useful it would be to have a flying mount for navigating the rugged mountains. Meanwhile, Kinsun saw Xuan and Hansen together. Irritated and jealous, the son of God's resentment grew deeper, seeing Hansen close to the girl. Yang told Xuan that she had arrived just in time. The purple dragon had just flown to the very top of the mountain. Even the arrows imbued with the beast soul hadn't been able to cause it serious harm. She asked what their next move should be. Xuan believed they had two options: either climb to the dragon's summit and try to kill it there, or find a way to drive it down. Otherwise, once it fully healed, their chances of winning would be zero. Qinsuan ordered his men to gather and start the climb, intending to force the purple dragon to descend, while he himself planned to wait below to deliver the final blow. The hunters approached a steep cliff and quickly realized the mountain looked nearly impossible to scale. The Son of God, irritated by their hesitation, abruptly commanded them to start climbing immediately. He added that anyone who reached the top would receive an extra share of the purple dragon meat as a reward. The hunters exchanged looks, seeing this as a prime opportunity not only to secure a large piece of dragon meat but also to increase their own genetic strength. Hansen observed that the Son of God's tactics remained the same, risking his people's lives to achieve his own goals. Xuan was confident the climb was doable and believed the chance for greater rewards justified the effort. Noticing Xuan's eagerness, the Son of God snapped at her, saying she had no reason to go upstairs. Her place was below, leading the subordinate hunters. Xuan disliked the idea, preferring to actively fight rather than wait on the sidelines. Then, unexpectedly, the Son of God shoved Hansen sharply on the shoulder and demanded to know why he hadn't started climbing yet. He ordered Hansen to follow Xuan immediately. The two young men exchanged angry, silent glances. Hansen realized the Son of God was deliberately setting obstacles for him. He clearly had some hidden plan that could endanger Hansen's life. Meanwhile, the hunters found strong vines and began their careful ascent, navigating the steep ledges as the purple dragon slowly regained its strength atop the mountain. Xuan led the way with confidence, showing impressive physical fitness and unyielding determination. The massive purple dragon spotted the hunters approaching, spread its enormous wings, and let out a loud, menacing cry that echoed through the mountains. As the first group reached the summit, the dragon launched a fierce counterattack, using its powerful wings and claws to push back the hunters. Xuan quickly assessed the situation and realized that the hunters couldn't defeat such a colossal beast in an open fight. She ordered her archers to take cover and attack from a safe distance. The shooters promptly found shelter behind rocks and crevices, ready to open fire on her command. Despite its exhaustion and numerous wounds, the purple dragon fought fiercely, waving its tail and smashing the archers' shelters to pieces. Hansen watched closely and saw that the dragon was seriously weakened. He decided the time had come for a decisive shot that would finish the monster once and for all. At that moment, the Son of God appeared nearby. He activated the spirit of the beast, and a massive energy field instantly formed behind him, taking the shape of a terrifying monster. Hansen hated the Divine Son's presence, knowing he could ruin his entire plan. The beast spirit lunged at Hansen and struck him with a powerful blow, stopping the young man from taking his final shot. The strike sent Hansen flying far to the side, and he plunged toward the abyss. At the last second, he grabbed hold of a rope. The rope swung violently, and Hansen's body slammed against the cold, steep rock face with a loud thud. He cried out in pain and cursed the Divine Son fiercely. Fortunately, Hansen's physical conditioning was enough to survive the blow without breaking any bones. Determined, Hansen climbed back up, looked around, and called the Son of God a bastard for using the beast soul in a clear attempt to kill the purple dragon. Meanwhile, the monster spirit summoned by the Divine Son swiftly approached the wounded purple dragon, ready to deliver the finishing blow. Hansen observed how cleverly the Divine Son used this tactic. His assistant had also employed the beast soul to complete the dragon's encirclement. Hansen realized his own monster spirit, called Bloody Killer, was powerless at this moment, so he decided to wait for a better opportunity. The spirit of the monster, taking the form of a massive lion, leapt forward and sank its enormous fangs into the dragon's body, attempting to cripple its ability to fight back. At the same time, the Tanyang monster spirit, shaped like a giant gorilla, struck the dragon's head with a powerful blow, delivering a final coordinated attack. Despite this, the purple dragon let out a piercing roar, rose to its feet, and violently threw the attacking spirits aside, showing it still had strength left. Seizing the moment, Xuan drew her combat dagger and charged in, convinced the dragon was already too weakened to resist. The divine son, confident in his quick victory, ordered his men to maintain the pressure and continue their assault until the dragon was destroyed. The young hunters gritted their teeth and simultaneously plunged their weapons deep into the dragon's massive flesh. Overwhelmed by unbearable pain, the dragon spread its wings and released a deafening cry that shook the surrounding area. A forceful wing strike blasted the attackers away in all directions. Xuan crashed into the nearest rock with full force. Hansen, watching closely, was filled with concern for her after such a hard impact. Gathering its remaining strength, the purple dragon soared into the air and landed on a nearby cliff. Panic swept through the hunters. They feared that if the monster gained height, their chance to kill it would vanish. Without hesitation, Hansen sprinted after the dragon. Voices rose from the senior hunters, demanding that the monster be prevented from escaping. Realizing the decisive moment had arrived, Hansen slowly reached for his quiver and drew an arrow forged from zed metal, capable of piercing even the toughest foes. Just then, the divine son, unwilling to lose his prize, summoned the beast spirit again, which took the shape of a massive bow. He fired an energy arrow directly at the purple dragon. Hansen watched as the divine son's energy beam sped forward, but his own confidence grew. The time was right. He released his bowstring, sending his zed metal arrow hurtling through the air with a sharp whistle. The arrow raced toward the target, colliding mid-air with the divine son's energy shot. Then, overtaking it, Hansen's arrow surged ahead, striking the purple dragon first. To an outside observer, it seemed both arrows hit simultaneously, but in truth, Hansen's shot was faster. The dragon let out a final, earth-shaking roar before its massive body crashed onto the mountain plateau, silencing the hunters in stunned confusion. The hunters, along with the divine son, expressed clear irritation, blaming Hansen and calling him a fool, since it was his arrow that ended the hunt. Xuan, still recovering from her fall, looked at Hansen in disbelief, wondering how he had managed to defeat such a formidable creature. The divine son, furious, grabbed Hansen's clothes and demanded to know if he had obtained the blood beast soul, his voice harsh and commanding. Hansen calmly replied that, of course, he would have liked to claim such a valuable trophy, but regrettably, this time luck was not on his side, and he did not receive any souls. Xuan, eyeing Hansen with suspicion, pressed him again about the purple dragon soul, insisting he tell the truth. She reminded him that, according to accepted rules, the soul of the beast belongs to whoever deals the fatal blow. Hansen said he felt no change within himself and was quite certain he had not gained the dragon soul. Hansen defended his decisive shot, arguing that if he hadn't acted when he did, the purple dragon might have flown away, rendering all the hunters' efforts useless. Xuan believed he might be telling the truth. After all, obtaining the soul of such a powerful beast was no easy feat. She ordered Hansen to drop the subject and warned him not to attract the attention of the divine son, who would surely kill him if he did. Hansen gratefully acknowledged her warning. Then his thoughts turned back to the fierce anger of the divine son, how violently he had struck him, cursing him with the worst names. He recalled how Xuan had shielded him with her body, boldly telling the divine son that if he harmed Hansen again, she would not hesitate to retaliate. As Hansen pictured Xuan standing protectively before him, he admired her fierce determination. He felt lucky knowing that without her, the divine son might have easily destroyed him. Later, Hansen enjoyed a hot shower, feeling physically renewed. A smile spread across his face as he pondered the dragon soul and tried to make sense of the day's events. Stretching out his right hand, a bright purple flame suddenly flared up on his palm, filling him with power. He remembered shooting the arrow at the dragon, and then a system notification congratulated him on a successful hunt, confirming that he had indeed received the beast soul. Joy swelled within him. Souls of such a high class were rare in the shelter, and he knew this was a valuable prize. Stepping out of the shower, Hansen immediately noticed that the color of his copper-toothed wolf had changed. He examined the creature closely and realized its blood level had now reached divine status. In just 3 months, the crystal had grown into a beast soul. Filled with awe, Hansen admired the creature and called his armor magnificent. He was thrilled by the rapid progress, realizing that he could reach divine warrior level in just 5 years, far faster than the divine son, who had taken more than 10. Grasping a sharp blade, Hansen resolved to consume the copper-toothed wolf and then purchase a primitive creature to raise next. In cold determination, he struck the monster and thought about how he couldn't afford to delay his plan to achieve god-level power. Eating the prepared meat, Hansen savored its taste. The soup was thick and rich. As he gnawed the bone, a system notification popped up, informing him he had gained 1 gene of divine blood. His excitement grew as more notifications arrived. He had received 7 genes in total, bringing his count to 25. Hansen planned to improve his Beast Soul arrows because Z-class arrows disappeared after one use and were very expensive. He wanted to find a way to make them more effective and reusable. Believing there must be information somewhere, he prepared to search the internet, ready to find the needle in a haystack until he succeeded. During his research, Hansen discovered mentions of a dark swamp, a frightening, dangerous place full of unknown threats. Anxiety gnawed at him as he read an old post by a hunter who described being pursued there by a mutant unlike any he had ever seen, barely escaping with his life. Further reading revealed that the dark swamp was home to many rare creatures. The post's author described spending a long time hunting there before finally killing a needle bee, a poisonous flying insect whose soul he transformed into a venomous arrow. The hunter warned that these bees were extremely dangerous and that hunting them had become a real test of skill and survival. Hansen was excited by this information. He believed mutants like these could offer powerful rewards. Their souls and bodies were excellent sources of strength. However, there was a major problem. The post did not specify the swamp's exact location. Hansen understood that finding it could take a very long time, complicating his quest. Determined not to get overwhelmed by distant problems, Hansen decided to focus on what he could do now without distraction. The story then shifts to an industrial area on the outskirts of the shelter, where Hansen met the arrow seller again. He was amazed by the vast arsenal of weapons displayed. Curious, Hansen asked if the seller had crafted all the weapons himself. The man confirmed that he did. The seller welcomed Hansen as a regular client and said he had something special this time. He handed Hansen a dagger made with 5% Z steel content, priced at a hefty 500,000 units, a cost that immediately piqued Hansen's interest. Carefully inspecting the dagger, Hansen could not hide his delight. The weapon was of exceptional quality and reasonably priced, definitely worth the investment. Hansen decided to buy the dagger and then gestured toward the wall, asking the seller to tell him about the other weapons on display. His eyes caught the glow of a sword hanging nearby, and he immediately sensed it was something special. The seller praised Hansen's sharp eye and explained that the sword was indeed exceptional, containing an astonishing 75% Z steel, a rare and incredibly valuable material. He then revealed the price, a staggering 100 million units. Hansen was skeptical. He couldn't believe a weapon could really contain that higher percentage of Z steel. His doubt offended the seller deeply. Without hesitation, the man threw Hansen out onto the street and ordered him to leave, adding that even if Hansen wanted it, he could never afford such an item. Now suspicious, Hansen began to wonder if the seller was a fraud. He knew that with current technology, it was impossible to embed such a high concentration of Z steel into a weapon. Just as these thoughts swirled in his mind, his phone suddenly rang. The caller told Hansen to meet him at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and promised to show him something intriguing. When Hansen asked for details over the phone, the caller insisted that Hansen had to see it with his own eyes.